This is a Maundy Thursday passage from Mark's Gospel. People who've been members of Trendlewood Church for a while will know that we've been following Mark's Gospel through, but we're doing the end bit out of order in order for it to fit with the appropriate readings from Maundy Thursday, Good Friday and Easter Sunday. So hear this. The Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or the people may riot. This is all in Mark chapter 14, that's the first couple of verses, and it goes on saying, while he was in Bethany, reclining at the table, in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them any time you want. But you will not always have me." She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. I tell you the truth. Wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. And then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money. So he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. It's a weird sort of passage, and it's slightly awkward for us. Jesus says some things that are not quite in keeping with what we think Jesus ought to say and be. Someone does something that's not quite in keeping with what we ought to do, and somebody ends up betraying him. The thing we need to know is that by this time in Mark's Gospel, he is set firmly to telling the story of Jesus' death and resurrection. This is the route, this is the journey, this is the map of where we are now going. And the chief priests, the teachers of the law, are looking for some, he says, sly way, furtive way to arrest Jesus and kill him, but not at a time when it might upset the crowd. Let's do it sensitively. Let's betray this man sensitively. Isn't that an appalling contradiction in terms? And then Jesus, in the house of a man known as Simon the leper, because he's not a leper anymore, because Jesus has healed him, because he hangs out with those sorts of people anyway, and relaxing, chilling, reclining at the table, having some food, and this strange act happens with this woman and the perfume. Anglicanism, formal Anglicanism, has been intruded, if that's the right word, recently by people who prefer a more informal style. I guess you'd say that those of us at Trendlewood are part of the intrusion. But by and large, different churches and different congregations and groups of people have their style to themselves. If somebody started to dance in a wildly charismatic way in the centre aisle at Wells Cathedral during an ordination, unprompted, there might be some looks. You're not keeping the rules. You're not doing quite what you're supposed to do. And so it is with this woman and the perfume, that her act of worship is an outburst. It's something that she just felt compelled to do, without giving any thought whatsoever to what could have happened. That the money that could have been used with the perfume what the perfume was eventually for. And therefore people are shocked. People are shocked at the waste and don't see the worship. People are always shocked when some spontaneous act of Christian response takes place in a place where it's not usual or common or expected. Regardless of whether it's right or wrong, we like our worship to be like our worship normally is. When I was at college, we used to have a communion service at 5:30 on a Thursday evening, and at 11:15 we went into the dining hall to eat our evening meal together, including families and other guests. This meant that although there was a framework, there was very little chance, but some chance, for some spontaneity in worship. And Kevin, one of the third year students who was leading it one year, said, as he was telling us how the service was going to go and welcoming us, said, the act of planned spontaneity will happen at 7:25 and last for 7 minutes. And we all laughed, because of course you can't plan spontaneity. The very thing that this woman is accused of doing, of not thinking about what she could have done with the perfume, is the very thing that makes it an astonishing act of worship. Because she didn't think. She saw Jesus, she had a spiritual insight of somebody who was going to his death and would eventually need anointing, and she did it before he died. Which leaves Jesus to defend her with these astonishing words, the poor you'll always have with you. These are wealthy people that he's surrounded by, and they dare to suggest how somebody else should use their money. You quite often find that people are critical of how Christians use their money, even if they're generous. And these people are critical of this woman's act of worship, even though she seems to be able to do it. In fact, they do some calculation about this is a year's wages for a poor person. Well, it may be. It may well be. But Jesus says, whenever the gospel is preached, what she's done will be told in memory of her, because she did what she could. And I think that's probably the best little short phrase or sentence in this whole passage. She did what she could. Elsewhere, people who give generously are praised, but the woman who gives her only 2 small coins is praised above all else, because she went over and above. She did what she could. What she could was give everything, so she gave that. Well, this prompts Judas to do his act of treachery and to go and start the process of betraying Jesus and having him handed over. Jesus, whose astonishment to people, whose outrageous comments have made opposition and division, is going to be handed over at some point in the near future. But in the meantime, in this topsy-turvy world, his body that would normally be anointed after death is anointed before death, almost a seal of approval on what he must go through, and yet making it into a thing of beauty. Which is why a really bad Friday tomorrow is a Good Friday, and why Easter Sunday is a time of resurrection. But the pain is not diminished in the meantime.